Okay, so today, because Halloween is coming up, we're going to learn to draw and paint pumpkins. So, I've seen people approach pumpkins in many different ways. I have my own variation on it. I don't start with the basic circle because I find it throws my proportions out. So what I am going to start with is, I'll just go a little closer so you can see, is I start with a long smile, and then I have 2 side smiles next to the long smile, so now it looks a little bit like someone sitting down, and then maybe an extra one to the sides. And you'll notice I'm not pressing terribly hard with my pencil because I want to be able to paint and not have the lines, my original lines, show through. Now, to get the top part of the pumpkin, what I do is I start with a very angular, depending on how tall you want it to be, a very angular letter C that combines with that last smile. And then I do the same on the other side. Now, it does not matter if they're not exactly the same on both sides, because pumpkins, they are not the same on both sides. Then at this top part, I do an unhappy face. Put in my stalk. Again, the stalks are quite angular. And then I'm going to close in my unhappy smile, my frown, to the stalk, just like that. Okay, now we put in the pieces. So I go from the bottom up, so I follow this curve, and I'm going to join it to this part of the point. And then the same on the other side. Then we do the same with the other smiles and bring them to that center point. Well, that one didn't work quite as well as I wanted it to. Let's try again. Right, so that gives us the front of our pumpkin. Now, behind the stalk, there's going to be the curves of the pieces that are at the back. So we put those in as little frowns on the other side. There you go. And that is how I draw pumpkins. Now I'm using 300 GSM watercolour paper because it holds the water really, really well, and it doesn't pill or stretch or buckle. I'm using a number 8 medium liner. It's a sable brush, and I love the fact that when you get a liner brush wet, you get a perfect point. So I am loving this brush at the moment. I've got my salt ready to go. I've got a jar of clean water to go, and I'm going to use my Jelly Bright pack today. These are colours that I've put together myself, and they come in this cute little pack, which is perfect for traveling, but they've got all the colours in there that you need to be able to do these bright, luminous paintings in Can't Wait to Paint. So today, for the pumpkins, I'm going to go with traditional pumpkin colours. So I'm going to be using oranges and yellows and reds. And just for a little variation, we're going to try some in green as well. So I'm going to wet my brush. I'm going to start with my most pale colour, which is always going to be yellow. And I say this at the start of every video, but I never take my own advice. You need to put just a little water onto each of the colours so that they have a chance to activate, because these are watercolours. They must be wet to work. Okay, yellows. Alrighty. Now the wet on dry happens here, where I'm going to do this front panel first, and I'm going to try and paint each panel individually rather than do the whole of the painting. So I've put my first spray of yellow on. Now I'm going to wet my brush and use just water to pull the colour down into that shape. You have to think about where your shadows are going to fall, and shadows tend to happen underneath objects and in crevices, as well as where the light doesn't hit your object. So I'm imagining that the light is hitting my pumpkin this way. So this part of the pumpkin will be lighter than the bottom. The bottom will always be a little darker. Okay, so I have my yellow. I'm going to do all my panels the same way. It doesn't matter if you're painting the separate panel and it touches a little bit. They're the same colours. It's just trying to get a little bit of that white paper showing through between each one. That's all we're trying to do. Okay, so the second colour I'm going to drop in there is orange. I'm using a cadmium orange. I want to preserve some of the yellow, and it'll always be darkest around this bottom part. So I'm going to drop my colour in around these edges and just use my brush to push it around. It's already quite damp, so I don't need to add any extra water. I'm just being careful with this bottom edge. And if it bleeds like it has done here, that's okay, because we're going to add orange to those panels as well. So again, darkest at the bottom. So I've got some of my Windsor red, and I'm just going to drop some of it into these areas here. And I'm just going to use my brush, no extra water, just my brush, just to push that colour around a little bit, make it push out. Now it will look quite red until it starts to dry. So as it moves itself around, it will blend with the yellow and the orange that we've got there already, and just give us some interesting textures. Oh, I've gone outside my own line. So we just clean that up. Oh, I don't know if you can hear in my video, that's my cat in the background. That's Henry. Henry is not very patient, and I think he's probably saying, "Mum, why aren't you giving me the attention?" And again, to get some really nice texture, I'm going to add a little bit of salt, particularly where we put that red. So that we get something interesting happening. Okay, now our pumpkin colours have dried. It's time to get on and do the stalks. So you can see that the salt crystals are still here. If your painting is still wet and you brush across, it'll actually smear colour across your image. You don't want that to happen. So very, very carefully, when it's dry, we remove the salt, but don't brush across just in case. Like these ones look like they might still be wet. When you mix all three primary colours, that's red, blue and yellow, you will get a mud colour. So let's try that in theory. I like that one better. Okay, then we're going to use that colour that we've mixed to paint in the stalk. If you've done what I've done and you've decided that you've used a little too much paint, like here, I've just decided it's actually a little too full on. Clean your brush out, dry it off on some paper towel, and use the dry brush just to pick up some of that colour onto the paper towel. Okay, time to add a little shadow to give our pumpkins a bit of 3-dimension. I'm going to stick with the stalk colour and the brush that I was using, and I'm going to add more water, make it really, really thin. And then I'm just going to use that around the edges like this to give it that 3D effect. Just like that, and then you can use your water to move it around so you don't end up with a hard edge. So we do the same for each pumpkin just to give it some dimension. And we can also, if your pumpkin is standing alone, you'd also get a bit of shadow underneath where the pumpkin actually was sitting on a surface. So we can take some of that shadow color again and just really carefully drag it along the bottom to create a shadow where the pumpkin would be sitting on a surface.